Hello to all my dear followers. I'd like to welcome you to a new chapter of What if Naruto trains to become a Genjutsu master alongside Kurenai? At the top right of the screen, I've left a card with a playlist showing all the chapters of this fanfic in order. Please, I ask for your likes and comments so I can bring you more chapters. Without further ado, enjoy.
Naruto and Sasuke deposited their eggs-wasted sensei onto the futon that had been laid out in a room at Tsunade's home. The team had managed to get to their client's house without any more incidents. Naruto had easily relinquished control of the team to Sasuke, who was giving the orders while they walked. Sakura was set to guard Tsunade as the two boys carried their sensei. It had taken close to 20 more minutes before the group had reached the house and been let in by the bridge builder's daughter, a pretty black-haired woman named Tsunade. She wore a black dress that covered her shoulders and went down to her knees. Over her chest and stomach was a white shirt on top of the dress. Her hair fell straight down her back with two bangs framing her face and black eyes. The team sighed as they finally began to relax from their journey. Kakashi, however, was deep in thought even as he laid still, resting. "I feel like I'm missing something," he thought to himself. He pondered this for a few minutes before he felt fatigue creep upon him. He decided to sleep and he could continue pondering the next day. Kakashi's lone eye closed and he fell into a deep sleep. Sasuke looked over as he saw Kakashi fall asleep. He looked up and said, "We need to set up a guard shift." Sakura and Naruto nodded. "I will take the first shift," Naruto said as he stood and went to walk outside. "Wait, you fought the most, Naruto, you should rest," Sakura said as Sasuke seemed to brood a bit at the fact it was true. Naruto turned around, his eyebrow cocked in a bit of a question as she was concerned for him. "I have the most stamina within this group. It makes sense to allow you to rest first. If we are attacked, I am the best one to be sleepy while fighting," Naruto said. Sakura opened her mouth to refute his claim but found she couldn't. He was right and Sasuke grunted in affirmation. "Come get one of us in 4 hours, Naruto," Sasuke said as he turned around. Naruto nodded and headed outside. His team took spots on the floor as they attempted to sleep with the other two futons that had been brought in by Tsunade. Scene break. Naruto walked out of the house and looked around before closing his eyes and began sensing for chakra signatures. He instantly located Sasuke and Sakura inside, his weakened sensei's chakra pool, and swept past them to feel for any others in range. After a few moments of not sensing anyone else in range, he sighed in relief and made a single hand sign, creating up to 10 shadow clones. "You know what to do," he said as he jumped up to the roof and settled in to get some shut-eye. 9 of the clones jumped up into the trees and disappeared into the foliage as they set up a perimeter surrounding the house while the final clone sat down next to Naruto, a last line of defense if he needed it. Naruto closed his eyes and fell asleep, intent on allowing his team to get as much sleep as possible. Scene break. Naruto woke when the sun's rays hit his eyelids. They fluttered open as he blinked the sleep away and sat back up. He had noticed he needed much less sleep than most others when he ate well. So, the 8 hours he had gotten must have been because of the strain his body was put under when he consistently moved at that speed. He was a little surprised Sasuke hadn't questioned how he had been so fast, but he could probably make it seem like it was an adrenaline rush. He contemplated telling them he had been training and decided he would do so if they didn't believe it was an adrenaline rush. Of course, he wouldn't reveal that he hadn't used his full speed. He sighed as he rubbed the reattached weights on his legs. He was going to have to upgrade them when he went back to the village as they were starting to become a little too comfortable on him. Naruto stood up and looked to his clone. "Anything happen?" he asked. "You should know." The clone deadpanned as he tapped his head. When Naruto cocked his head in confusion, the clone sighed and bopped himself, disappearing in a puff of smoke to let him know that none of his clones had disappeared. He shook his head. "How am I supposed to tell them to dispel?" he thought to himself before thinking of how this clone had just dispelled himself. He shrugged and decided to test an idea. Naruto made a single clone and said, "The rest of you dispel," before he bopped the surprised clone on the head and caused it to disappear. Naruto waited a few seconds before he felt a huge headache appear and the memories of the sensory clones being downloaded into his brain. He shook his head as he felt the pain disappear after a few seconds and cursed, "Damn!" Reminder, don't dispel a bunch of clones at once. he said to himself as he realized nothing had happened and jumped down to the ground. Naruto walked back inside the house and into the room where his team was sleeping peacefully. But Kakashi turned to meet his gaze as he entered and Naruto felt his cold mask slip into place. "Good morning, Kakashi-sensei," he said with a slight inflection in his voice, showing he was slightly glad to see his sensei awake. "Kakashi," I smiled. "Good morning, Naruto-kun. How was your guard duty?" he asked. Naruto shrugged and sat down next to his sensei. "It was fine," he answered. "Nothing to do, that's good. But I have a few questions, Naruto-kun," he said as his eye glinted with seriousness. Naruto sighed and looked at his sensei expectantly. "First off, how did you get so fast?" he asked as he eyed the weights he had somehow missed. Naruto looked down and noticed his sensei's gaze. "Training and adrenaline rush. I met a jounin who likes to use weights and he suggested it to increase speed," he said. Kakashi's eye narrowed. He hoped it wasn't who he thought it was. "What was his name?" he asked curiously. Naruto shook his head. "I don't know. I only met him once and I don't really want to remember the encounter." Naruto quickly shuddered in the hopes that Kakashi would buy this excuse. Kakashi nodded sympathetically, much to Naruto's slightly hidden surprise. "I understand," he said, pausing for a moment before fixing Naruto with a more intense stare. "But there is one more thing, Naruto-kun. How did you know where Zabuza was going to be when his clone appeared in your midst?" he asked. Naruto's eyes widened as he looked at his sensei in shock. "Kakashi-sensei, you keep forgetting I am a censor," Naruto accused to Kakashi's narrow eye. His chakra spiked right there before he showed up. "I didn't realize that it was because he was making a water clone from the mist until after it dispelled," he answered in a little bit of an irritated tone that his sensei had forgotten Naruto's possibly most important part of this team. Kakashi nodded and turned to the rest of the team. "I'm missing something here," he said as Sasuke and Sakura both got out of bed and walked over, having listened in on the conversation. "Those weapons that the Hunter Nin used were simple needles." Kakashi trailed off as Naruto looked at his team with a bit of surprise before shrugging his shoulders in acceptance that they had heard. "Plus, aren't they supposed to destroy the body right there, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto questioned, drawing from his newfound book knowledge. Kakashi nodded grimly. "If he wanted proof, he could have taken the blade or his head," Sasuke supplied. "Hunter Nins know the body very well. Even though I confirmed his death, he could have been in a momentary state of animation. The fact he used a non-deadly weapon, which is sometimes even used as an acupuncture by doctors, suggests that the Hunter Nin was Zabuza's accomplice and came in to save Zabuza and not kill him." Kakashi finished. "Most likely, Zabuza is still alive." A silence fell across the room as the team tried to take that information in. Sakura finally broke the silence, a sliver of fear causing her to stutter. "So, what are we going to do?" she asked. Kakashi I smiled. "We are going to get you ready for battle. You are going to receive training," he said as if it was obvious. "Training?" Sasuke asked with a bit of worriness in his voice. He couldn't deny he was a bit worried and a bit excited over the prospect that Zabuza might be alive. Naruto had a grin on his face from the moment Kakashi had said training. Kakashi chuckled. "What could we train in that could possibly allow us to fight someone of your caliber, Kakashi-sensei?" Sakura asked. As excited as Naruto was, he knew that was a very valid question. He may have fought the man's clones, but he couldn't even come close to the actual person. Clones, no matter which ones they were only a fraction of the actual person's skill. "You can't," which caused Sakura to begin to interrupt until Kakashi continued. "But a person put into a momentary state of animation will not be able to function at full strength for a decent length of time. So we have time for me to recover and to train you to take on anyone else that he might bring with him. Even if Zabuza isn't alive, we aren't sure if Gato hasn't hired someone else." Sasuke and Naruto both looked quite excited to be training while Sakura looked a bit unsure of herself. Kakashi had expected this. "First things first though, let's have some breakfast," Kakashi said as he got up from the futon and grabbed a crutch that had been placed by his bedside. The team picked up the futons and rolled them up, while placing them in the closet before they all headed downstairs for a bit of breakfast. Scene break. As the team came down the stairs into the living room of the house, Tsunade exited the kitchen while wiping her hands with a cloth. She looked up and smiled. Oh good, you're awake. Breakfast is on the table. Please come and eat, she said as she turned back around and re-entered the kitchen. The team blinked before registering that they wouldn't have to cook their own food and headed into the kitchen. As they entered, they took notice of the pots and pans in the sink before noticing the table, which had a decent amount of food on each plate at each setting. The team quickly sat down and looked at Tsunade as she sat before uttering a quick thanks for the food and digging in. As they ate, Naruto noticed that there were 2 more places set for food. He quickly recalled that he only knew of one other person within the house. Where's Tsunade-san? Naruto asked, a bit more warmly than if he had been just with his team, as he paused in his eating. Tsunade looked up and shook her head. My father will be up soon. He doesn't like to be up too early, she said. Who is the other place for? Naruto asked, getting the attention of his team and sensei, who looked up in question as well. My son Inari, she answered after looking at the place set with a bit of sadness. The team seemed to nod in agreement as they then continued to eat in silence. Quickly, the team was ready to head out and were about to set out as Kakashi spoke. Thank you for the meal, Tsunade-san, Kakashi said with an eye smile, earning a small blush and an uttered you're welcome before he continued. Well, time for training. Let's head out into the woods. Tsunade-san shouldn't need us today, the building doesn't restart until tomorrow, he said as he began to rise from his seat. These guys are all going to die. A child's voice wafted over the table from the direction of the living room. Team 7's heads snapped to the voice in question, only to see a boy of 7 to 8 years old standing in the doorway. He wore a striped bucket hat with a blue overall and a white shirt. His hair was matted down under the hat, peeking out from under it. Inari, be polite. These are the ninja that protected your grandfather, Tsunade scolded as she stood from her own place. Inari seemed to scrutinize the team for a moment before stating, You can't win. You're going to die. You can't beat Gato, he said in a saddened tone. Naruto's eyes seemed to harden as he looked at the boy with an expression of dislike. Kakashi and Sakura both looked a bit shocked and Sasuke was glaring at the kid. There's no way this Gato guy is anything hard. You civilians may see him as impossible to beat, but to shinobi like us, Naruto stated as he motioned to his team. Gato is nothing more than a worm waiting to be plucked from the ground by a bird of prey. Sasuke smirked as he looked over at Naruto. Even Sakura looked more confident than before as Kakashi eye-smiled from how Naruto had boosted his team's resolve. Inari only seemed to be irritated. What are you, stupid? He questioned, drawing tick marks from all 3 genin. Even Naruto was annoyed by this brat's attitude. If you don't want to die, you should just leave. There's no place here for idiots trying to be heroes, Inari said before turning around and walking back up the stairs. Naruto and Sasuke glared after the boy as Sakura looked at the boy with a bit of shock. Tsunade sighed. I'm sorry, she said. Kakashi just waved her off. It's no problem, Tsunade-san. We will protect your father either way. Please tell Tsunade-san where we have gone and to not leave the house. We will not be far from the house, Kakashi said, to which Tsunade nodded before Kakashi led his team away from the house. Scene break. Kakashi and his team entered a small clearing about 5 yards away from the house. Kakashi turned around and eye-smiled at them. What I will be teaching you today requires for you to know about chakra, he said. He was a little surprised when Naruto seemed to understand what he was talking about instead of being clueless like many times before. I wonder what has caused his jump in intelligence. He knows far more than he should, and his vocabulary is much wider than I had anticipated. Even if he was reading books, I don't think he should know this exercise. The library doesn't have chakra control exercise books until Chunin level, and he doesn't have access to it. Though I suppose he could have read about chakra itself elsewhere, Kakashi thought to himself. With Naruto, Kakashi was quickly starting to learn that he knew more than he should. In other words, Kakashi just didn't know where he was getting the information from, since he never asked for training and Kakashi hadn't seen him with a book until yesterday in the village. He shrugged it off and continued speaking. Now, there are 2 parts to chakra, physical and spiritual. One is contained within your body and the other is from experience. It is the combination of these 2 parts of chakra that allows us to use jutsu through formation of chakra through hand seals. Kakashi nodded as his genin were paying close attention and continued. Up until now, you have been using chakra wrong. he said, causing Sakura and Sasuke's expressions to turn into shock while Naruto simply looked at his sensei with a bored expression now. Kakashi pouted internally. He loved being able to annoy his genin and Naruto was taking some of the fun out of it. What I mean is that you have been wasting chakra with each jutsu. Drawing the incorrect amount for a jutsu will result in a weakened or inactive jutsu. Then how do we learn to pull the correct amount of chakra? Sakura asked inquisitively. Kakashi smiled as he brought a single finger up as if he was going to make some big announcement before. Tree climbing, he stated cheerfully, causing Sasuke and Sakura to look at him like an idiot and Naruto to simply stare at his sensei with a hint of amusement and exasperation. How is climbing trees supposed to help us? Sasuke asked as Sakura nodded her head in agreement. Naruto just seemed to grin slightly, which caused Kakashi to narrow his eye. Kakashi walked over to a tree and held his hand in a ram sign before turning to the tree and beginning to walk up the side of the tree calmly. He walked up to the lowest branch and hung from the branch, upside down as he started to explain. This exercise is twofold. First, you will learn how much chakra you need to channel. The feet are considered the hardest place to channel chakra to. As a result, even though the amount of chakra necessary for this exercise is small, even skilled ninja sometimes have trouble with this. Secondly, it trains your stamina in controlling chakra. Many times a ninja will have to control their chakra while moving and during battle. This exercise makes it easier to do so. Building stamina to do this can result in your defeating your opponents. Kakashi lectured as he pulled 3 kunai from his pouch and threw them at his genin's feet. Use those to mark your progress. You may want to try running towards the tree before walking though, he said as he dropped down from the branch and landed on his feet. Sasuke and Sakura looked determinedly at the tree, but Naruto looked bored as he watched his teammates. Kakashi landed and watched as 2 of his genin closed their eyes and concentrated on their chakra. Both Naruto and Kakashi could feel their chakra building on the bottom of their feet before they both took off running towards the trees. Sasuke took 3 steps before his foot was blasted away from the tree bark as it splintered under his foot. He marked his spot and jumped backwards to land on his feet. Sakura, however, managed to run all the way to the top of the tree as Sasuke glared at his own. Too much and you get blown away. I'm pretty sure if there isn't enough you don't stick. Sasuke muttered to himself. This is easy, Sakura said as she sat upon the highest branch in the tree. Naruto looked up with slight amazement. He knew her chakra control had to be good for medical chakra, but she hadn't shown anything past basic level stuff. To be able to walk all that way on her first try, her control was nothing short of perfect. Though he also knew her chakra pool was much smaller than Sasuke's and a mere teacup compared to the pool he himself possessed. His sensor telling him how big their chakra pools were. Kakashi smiled as he looked up at Sakura. Seems Sakura has the best control. Though I wonder why you didn't try Naruto, he said questioningly. Naruto merely smirked as he walked past the kunai Kakashi had thrown at him before reaching his own tree. He looked back at his sensei as he began to walk up the tree with no effort. Kakashi's eye narrowed and Sasuke clenched his fists as he looked at Naruto. Once Naruto had reached the top of the tree, Kakashi yelled out, "Get down here, Naruto." Naruto shrugged before walking back down the tree and up to his sensei. Kakashi looked to Sasuke and Sakura and said, "Get to work. This will seriously help the both of you." He turned to Naruto. "We need to have a talk," he said before walking a bit of distance from Sasuke and Sakura. "Okay, Naruto. I know you haven't learned these things from just looking around. I would like to know where you have been training," he said seriously. Naruto looked at him for a second before responding in his now usual cold voice from his team. "You said to check the library. That's what I did. It's amazing what books you can get, even from the shinobi section with a simple henge," Naruto said as his cunning mind churned for answers to anything Kakashi might ask, determined to keep Kurenai out of this. Kakashi seemed to scrutinize him for a moment before nodding. "All right, I believe you. But I would like for you to tell me what you are training in from now on, Naruto. I can't effectively lead my team if I don't know what you can do. It may cause complications," he said as he looked at Naruto with seriousness. Naruto nodded as he looked back at his teammates. "Since I already know that exercise, can I go train by myself?" Naruto asked. Kakashi shook his head. "No, you are going to help them if they need it for today and I am going to rest. Since you obviously have it mastered, You will be on guard duty tomorrow," Kakashi said before he started to limp away. Naruto sighed as he turned and walked back towards his teammates. As he re-entered the clearing, he looked over at his teammates and nodded to the both of them before sitting down and closing his eyes, deciding to train his bloodline while it simultaneously allowed him to watch his teammates' progress. Scene break. Most of the day was spent in this fashion. Sakura attempting to increase her stamina while Sasuke attempted to reach higher up the tree, growing frustrated at his lack of progress. Naruto sat under the canopy of leaves, meditating and pushing his senses to the limit to enhance his mastery of his bloodline. This ended when Naruto sensed that Sakura was close to passing out from chakra exhaustion, according to how weakly he could feel her chakra, even from how close he was to her. He opened his eyes and looked up, already knowing where Sasuke's latest mark was, and rose his voice. "Sakura, come down here and go home. You're done for the day," he said. His voice held a slight warmth which indicated his concern for her health. Sakura looked down, sweat rolling down her panting face. "No, I can still go on," she panted out. Naruto frowned as Sasuke looked back at Naruto from his latest failure. "No," Naruto said, a hint of his iron will reappearing after weeks of bowing to their wishes. "You will do more harm than good passed out from chakra exhaustion like Kakashi-sensei. Go rest and you can continue tomorrow," he said. Sakura looked down for a moment before agreeing with his logic and beginning her walk back to the forest floor. Sasuke glared at Naruto and turned back to the tree, dedicated to finishing this exercise as fast as possible. Naruto closed his eyes again and pushed his full attention on Sasuke's chakra. He felt the ebb and flow of it as he pulled upon it to complete his task. Naruto seemed to nod to himself as he opened his eyes again and watched Sakura walk away from the field, with one last look at Sasuke before she disappeared. Naruto waited a few more minutes, allowing Sasuke to try the exercise a few more times before he closed his eyes and made sure Sakura was back at the house. He nodded to himself as he began to concentrate on his surroundings again, only to notice that Sasuke had moved closer to him. He snapped his eyes open and locked his gaze with Sasuke. The two young men stared each other down before Sasuke spoke in a low whisper. "Is she gone?" he asked. Naruto's eyebrow twitched in an almost questioning way before he nodded. Sasuke relaxed a bit and then spoke in a quiet voice again. "How do you do this?" he asked with a hint of self-loathing from having to ask for help. Naruto's eyebrows almost shot up in surprise when he heard the question. Now he wanted his help? Now Sasuke was interested in him? Now, Naruto's blue eyes almost seemed to turn into a glacier instead of just the orbs of ice they normally were as he stared at his teammate. Sasuke shifted uncomfortably and was about to just turn around and continue his exercise when Naruto spoke, low and almost menacingly. "Your emotions toy with your control. Let go of your frustration and it will come much easier," Naruto responded. Sasuke blinked at his teammate before nodding and turning around to restart his exercise. Had he continued to look, he would see a confused expression on Naruto's face. "Why did I just help him?" he asked himself. "I shouldn't even give him the time of day, and yet here I am, helping him get stronger. What the hell is wrong with me?" Naruto thought to himself. This was the guy Naruto had declared his rival and had written him off for years until this very day when he asked for this help. This was the guy who was loved by all and handed everything to on a silver platter. Why the hell was he helping this guy? He shook his head as he looked at Sasuke attempt the tree again and managed to almost double his distance from his advice. "Though it does feel kind of good when he excels like that," he added absent-mindedly. As much as Naruto tried to ignore his teammates, deep down inside, Naruto couldn't turn anyone away. He craved their acceptance. Yes, that craving had lessened to almost non-existent, but he did spend an inordinate amount of time with Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi, so he naturally wanted their acceptance. At the same time, he was also a kind-hearted person. Naruto's basic teaching from his Gigi had stuck to this day, and Naruto would almost never refuse to lend a helping hand to someone if they asked for his help. Despite how conflicted Naruto may feel, he still helped people close to him as a natural reaction. The cold mask he put on around his team was to help him ignore their plights unless they directly involved him within it. As heartless as that may seem, they treated him much worse and almost abused him when he did not do this, so he put on the mask. Though Naruto only understood part of this reason consciously, subconsciously, He was fully aware that if he were to drop his cold mask, things would quickly revert to how they were before their success rate shot to near perfect. Naruto sighed and returned to his meditation as Sasuke smirked from his new, higher position in the tree. Scene break. Naruto carried an exhausted Sasuke into the house and dropped him on the couch as he walked over to the kitchen, seeing Sakura and Kakashi sitting there along with Tsunade, Inari, and Tsunade. Naruto merely spared a glance at the boy before saying, "Sasuke is on the couch, he almost overdid it." Sakura stood up and walked into the living room as Naruto went and sat down at the table. He bowed his head and gave thanks before breaking his chopsticks and beginning to dig into the food. Shortly afterwards, Sakura came back into the dining room with Sasuke on her back. She set him down in his chair and propped him up before he grunted weakly in thanks. Sakura said nothing as she went and sat back in her seat. The whole table clinked with the sound of utensils hitting dinnerware. Naruto's eyes seemed glued to his food, but in truth he was watching the little boy out of the corner of his eye. He could see the slumped shoulders and air of defeat that seemed to be all over the boy's manners. But oddly enough, the boy stared at a picture on the wall with a sort of longing before finishing his food and getting up from the table. He didn't even acknowledge the taste of the food to his mother before walking up the stairs and slamming his door shut. Naruto sighed internally. There was a bigger story, and Naruto's bad childhood made him feel like he wanted to know about Inari's. Any reason? Naruto started to gain the attention of the table. Why Inari-san was staring at that ripped picture on the wall? Naruto asked quietly. Tsunade and Tsunade seemed to tense, which caused Naruto and Kakashi's eyes to narrow. Inari used to laugh a lot, you know? Tsunade said sadly. He had a father, not by blood but by bond. He said, "My husband." Tsunade supplied as she looked at the picture wistfully. The man that was called the hero of this city. Inari met the man about 5 years ago. There had been some bullies who had taken Inari's dog, Pochi. Tsunade started. Naruto's hands clenched under the table. They tried to take the dog, but when Inari kept insisting that it was his, the bullies grew angry and threw the dog in the water. Inari watched as the dog struggled to stay afloat, scared of going into the water because he didn't know how to swim. Tsunade explained. The bullies teased him further, saying that he should jump in and save his precious dog, until one of them pushed him into the water. This caused looks of shocks to appear on the team's faces as Naruto's face grew grim. He floundered for a little while until Pochi dog paddled to safety and the bullies left Inari in the water while chasing the dog away. Inari almost drowned because of them. Tsunade said darkly, "That was when my husband found him. He jumped in and saved Inari-kun before tracking down the kids and getting them to admit to what they had done to their parents. He gave Inari-kun some very wise advice and eventually, he became very close to Inari-kun. His name was Kaiza. He was a fisherman looking to complete his dreams," Tsunade said as she gained a glazed look from remembering the past and fond memories. He saved a part of the village from a terrible flood. Many people called him a hero because of it, and it only cemented Inari's faith in him once more. Tsunade said sadly, "But then Gato came to the city and Tsunade trailed off as Tsunade got up and left the room, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Naruto's eyes were no longer the ice cold they had been since he had met Tsunade. They transformed into a vibrant blue that shone like silver when one looked into his eyes as he heard this story. His entire team seemed to sit up and pay attention because of the way this family had been affected. And then, Gato falsified charges about Kaiza to the people and had him executed in front of the entire town, including Inari. Tsunade said darkly. Everyone's eyes widened in shock as Tsunade calmly stood and walked to the living room, stopping just before leaving and talking back to them. That was the day that courage and hope were snuffed out in this town. That was the day heroes ceased to exist, he said before heading into his own room. The team sat there for a few more minutes before Kakashi cleared his throat. "Okay, that was a bit heavy. Well, tomorrow is a new day and we all will need our strength. Let's go get some rest and we can continue training tomorrow," he said. The entire team nodded before placing their dishes in the sink and heading to their own beds, Sakura taking the first watch of the night. Scene break. Naruto looked at Tsunade as the two headed towards the bridge. He had put his shinobi mode back on, but his eyes were a bit more expressive than before. Naruto himself was a bit depressed that he couldn't train and was stuck guarding Tsunade, though he had to admit it was much better for him to be guarding Tsunade than Sakura. He grinned as he thought of his teammates getting stronger. The way he saw it, the stronger they were, the stronger the missions they could go on. He knew he himself was probably the weakest part of his team since he couldn't cast his specialty yet, but he was hoping to be able to figure out the problem about that as soon as he could see his Gigi about it. He had decided he would go to the Hokage, the smartest and most knowledgeable person about being a ninja alive, if he couldn't cast a Genjutsu by the time he mastered the water walking exercise. He was fervently hoping he wouldn't have to, but if that was what had to happen, then he would do it. Naruto had a feeling that his problem may lie with his seal. Though he knew not how it worked, he had a feeling that Kyuubi's chakra may be the problem with his Genjutsu. He sighed as he shook his head and decided to ask Tsunade a few questions. "Tsunade-san," Naruto stated questioningly. Tsunade looked at Naruto with a bit of surprise. "I apologize for scaring you when we first met. However, people have been underestimating me since my childhood, and I do not take well to it." Tsunade seemed to slump in relief before a small smile worked its way across the man's face. Naruto crushed that smile quickly. "That does not mean my warning was not appropriate. Underestimate ninja and they will kill you," he said as he allowed a foxy grin to spread across his face, causing Tsunade to pale before nodding. "Now, is what everything you said about Kaiza the truth?" Naruto asked as he looked the man in the eye. Tsunade's eyes grew steel in them as they stepped onto the path that led through the town. Naruto's eyes picked up on how desperate the people looked. The buildings were all dilapidated, and some seemed ready to fall in upon themselves. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he looked at the alleys and saw small forms sleeping within the shadows of the broken houses and shops that had survived Gato's reign of terror. "Yes, it is. That is why this bridge is so important. It is the symbol of courage to this country and to this town. Without it, this country will be at Gato's complete mercy. I must complete this bridge because of that, and to show Inari that his father wasn't wrong. That you must protect what is precious to you with your own two hands," Tsunade said as they walked through the village, showcasing just how bad Gato had destroyed this town and its hope. "This town is on its last leg and I won't let it go out without a fight. Even if Gato tries to kill me, I will attempt to finish this bridge until there isn't a breath left within my frail old body." Naruto nodded, satisfied. "A very rousing speech, Tsunade-san. Inari is very lucky to have you as a grandfather," he said as he inclined his head slightly to the man before walking towards the bridge in the distance as they exited the town. "I shall be meditating while I protect you, Tsunade-san. Please come tap me if you need me for anything beyond fighting." Tsunade smiled at Naruto's back as he put on his hard hat and walked behind Naruto as the two approached the bridge. Scene break. As Naruto meditated, he spread his senses out to check his surroundings with his sensor just as he did yesterday. Staying in that same position for most of the morning, Naruto continued to enhance his sensor world, as Kurenai and he had become to call it. He could still only see things in differing shades of gray, but chakra itself was not gray any longer, no matter whose it was unless they were of a civilian level of chakra. They were all different colors of blue chakra. He was starting to get to the point where he might catch those different types of chakra within others if it was more pronounced like Kakashi's or some of the other Jounin-level ninja within the village. But the difference in blue for each chakra was minimal at best, and he knew that it would take a long time for him to be able to tell differences in chakra with just a bare sensor reading of the chakra, which was all he got in regards to what he could sense, unless he had time to study the person's chakra. So, he was trying to get better at sensing differences in chakra by sensing these civilians. Naruto had been meditating for a few hours before deciding to train his water walking. He put his hands in a single hand sign and a few seconds later, the bridge had about 8 clones standing on it plus the original. Naruto turned to 4 of them. "You 4 go in the trees next to the path and set up a perimeter there." Those 4 clones trotted down the bridge back towards the land. Naruto turned to the others. 3 of you will post yourselves around the various garters and hide. Sense as much as you can. You, Naruto pointed to one clone. Take my place here and keep your attention solely on Tsunade's area. He ordered and his clones nodded before disappearing and one simply sitting down to meditate. Naruto nodded and jumped on top the railing before walking down the bridge's side and walking onto the water's surface. Once he got there, he sweat dropped as he realized he needed someone to fight to test his mastery. He began to think for a few minutes before facepalming himself, I use shadow clones to fight on the ground, why can't they do this too? He thought it was painfully obvious that they should be able to stand on the water so long as they had chakra. He made 4 more clones, 3 of which moved to a safe distance and watched as Naruto took a relaxed stance while looking at his opponent. Since he had already stretched out before they left the house this morning, he was ready to begin right away. Though Naruto had not trained in any taijutsu style, Kurenai had made him attempt to dodge her while she attacked him. The principle behind this: he would be able to dodge those of superior speed and skill if his reflexes were honed, and it would be beneficial to any type of taijutsu he might later on choose. Because Kurenai was not a taijutsu specialist, he had decided to find one at a later date to teach or simply help him choose a taijutsu later on. As a result of this plus his newfound flexibility with his stretching, Naruto was capable to contort his body rather easily to dodge an attack. Kurenai had even been surprised when he had quickly shown improvement in his flexibility, something they both attributed to his muscles being remade faster by the Kyuubi. Naruto's style of taijutsu was currently a reactive type, one that relied on his opponent attacking and him defending to get himself more room. So, the clone shot forward and began his assault on his creator. The clone threw a punch, which was dodged as Naruto took a step to the left and attempted to send his own punch into the clone's stomach. The clone saw the coming move and twisted with his step, allowing himself to come with a backhanded fist to Naruto's head as he spun around Naruto's own punch. Naruto ducked down and swept his foot out to catch the clone's footing. The clone saw Naruto duck down and guessed his line of attack as he backflipped over his creator and landed a few steps away from his creator as he retook his stance. Naruto cursed. Dodge training translated to his own clones, and that caused for him to be fighting an enemy as slippery as himself, something he had quickly learned wasn't fun. Naruto jumped forward and brought his own hand down in a chop to his clone's neck. The clone deflected his hand with his own arm sweep and sent a quick jab to Naruto's chin. Naruto took a step back, causing the jab to miss as he brought his other hand around to pull his clone forward from his outstretched arm. The clone was pulled forward, and the look of surprise on his face was the last thing Naruto saw as he jumped up and kicked off the clone's chest, causing it to dispel as he was launched back towards the bridge. Naruto saw one of his clones rushing forward to take advantage of his position, and he planted his hand on the top of the water, the chakra he channeled keeping him afloat as he brought his leg up in a kick to ward off the clone's attack as he flipped himself back to his feet. While he was in the second half of the spin, though, he began the hand seals for a genjutsu that would affect his clone's depth perception. It was a low C rank that Naruto should have no trouble casting, but he felt it catching and his excitement coursed through him before feeling it being broken right as he finished the technique's hand seals while landing on top of the water. Naruto cursed as his clone began to shoot forward from his step backwards to avoid Naruto's kick, but they were interrupted by a splash from the place where 2 of Naruto's clones had been. Naruto and his clone looked over at the place, and a look of confusion appeared on Naruto's face as he only saw one clone while a few bubbles were where the other one had been standing. Both of his clones looked over before they started to chuckle as a clone suddenly appeared, sputtering the water he had apparently swallowed when he had fell into the ocean. Naruto cocked an eyebrow. The clone shouldn't have trouble standing on the calm waters. "What happened?" he asked. The clone glared indignantly at the other clones before hearing the question and suddenly jumped up from the water and landed on the water closer to Naruto. His eyes shone a bright blue, something Naruto knew his own eyes did when he learned something especially interesting. "Boss, try casting that genjutsu at the other you one more time," the clone said excitedly. Naruto's eyebrow raised and the other clones stopped laughing as they all stared at the clone, who began to look uncomfortable after a few seconds. "Just do it. I think I solved our problem," the clone said, which caused Naruto to look over at the other clone with determination. The other clone nodded and Naruto began the hand signs as he saw the clone next to him close his eyes. Again, Naruto felt the genjutsu seemingly start to catch within his clone's mental chakra before he lost it right near the end of the hand signs and the technique failed. He turned to the clone with an exasperated expression, only to be caught off guard as the clone jumped up and yelled, "Yada! Yada! I figured it out and we don't need to go see GG for this." He jumped around for a few more seconds, before feeling a murderous aura coming off of Naruto himself, along with the other clones, none of whom knew what that clone had figured out. "And," Naruto said impatiently. The clone stopped jumping around like an idiot as he chuckled nervously. Well, when you start to do the jutsu," the clone said nervously. Naruto just looked at him impatiently as the clone started to explain what he had discovered. I was trying to feel out your chakra as you fight, so we could use that in the future, and I noticed how your chakra seems twisted, intertwined. The clone started to list off words, all of which led Naruto to one conclusion. Mixed up? Jumbled? The clone meant to say Naruto's chakra wasn't like everyone else's, whose were a single color and flowed one way. His seemed different. He took a thinking pose as he tried to comprehend what the clone was saying before one of the other clones yelled, "Shut up! We get the picture." As he whomped the muttering clone on the head. Instantly, Naruto knew what the clone had experienced and sweat dropped when he thought of the fact he could have done that from the beginning. Naruto's own chakra seemed comprised of not one chakra. No, Naruto's chakra was completely unique. He idly wondered why he hadn't sensed this about himself earlier, but decided his bloodline didn't include his own chakra unless he specifically targeted his own sensor onto himself. As a matter of fact, Naruto's chakra wasn't even a combination of two different types of chakra like Naruto would expect, blue for himself and another color for Kyuubi. No, Naruto's chakra was a mixture of three colors. The first, and the one with the least amount within his body, seemed a light blue almost akin to the color of the sky. It seemed to be more white than blue, but Naruto couldn't figure out what this type of chakra was. It wasn't anywhere near any type of chakra he had encountered before. It had no special feeling to it, like that Hunter Nin's. Other than that, it flowed faster than his other chakra. It was simply there. It was something which Naruto had no idea where it might come from. This pool of chakra seemed as big as Sasuke's own. The second, and the one with the most amount within his body, was a dark blue chakra that was more akin to purple than anything else. This chakra seemed closest to his teammates and Kakashi's chakra, but it was slower flowing and thrummed with power through Naruto's sensor. Naruto assumed this was his normal chakra supply since he seemed to have the most of this. He was a bit surprised that this pool of chakra was as large as, and probably larger than, Kakashi's. The third, and one he was rather sure of the source, was a malignant red which originated from his belly. The odd thing with this chakra, though, was it was released at regular intervals at set amounts, all of which dissipated into the darker blue chakra stream before ever making it past his torso area. The chakra was powerful, but Naruto could feel the malicious intent oozing from those single drops of what he assumed was the Kyuubi's chakra. This was what the clone had discovered when he paid close attention to Naruto's chakra coils itself. Within his chakra coils, he had the light blue, dark blue, and red chakra all intermingling within him. Throughout his whole body, the light blue and dark blue seemed to twist together through his coils. They each followed his coils but seemed to wrap around each other without meshing together, the chakras staying separate, making them look to be almost like pipes in a sewer. Within his torso alone, the red chakra followed suit, creating a third pipe of chakra that eventually disappeared into the other two as the other chakra led into his neck, arms, and legs. However, his problem with Genjutsu lay with these three types of chakra. Naruto sorted through the memories of the clone and noticed that, just as Naruto began his hand signs for his technique, the slower-moving, almost purple chakra slugged its way through his coils to his arms and out towards his opponent in the proper way that the Genjutsu should be cast. However, as the chakra continued being supplied to solidify the Genjutsu within the opponent's chakra, his light blue chakra seemed to lash out and attempt to follow the darker chakra just as it did within his own body. Naruto quickly ascertained that his only problem with his techniques was the light blue chakra that would somehow have to remain separate during his Genjutsu casting. He would have to find a way of keeping that other chakra out of the technique to allow himself control over the chakra to plant the Genjutsu. He thought for a few moments before realizing that there was only two ways to keep that light blue chakra out of the way. The first would be following his self-made chakra exercise. He could take the dark blue chakra and send it at his enemy, while simultaneously expelling the light blue chakra to get rid of it in an attempt to keep it from interfering with his technique. The downside to this would be a wastage of chakra and alerting almost anyone with chakra sensing abilities to his own location. The plus side would be it would allow him to use Genjutsu until he could perfect the second choice. The second would be channeling it elsewhere within his body while casting the Genjutsu, something he was sure would take months to do. As hard as his chakra exercises were, it was much harder to channel chakra within the body than to simply expel it. The plus side to this was that the chakra being channeled within his own body could be used to enhance himself while casting, such as channeling that light chakra to his legs in order to run faster while he is simultaneously using the other chakra to cast the Genjutsu, something no one else should be able to do because of his unique situation. Naruto supposed there might be other ways he wasn't considering, but he had no choice but to use these two until he managed to return to Konoha and speak with Kurenai. Naruto turned a questioning look back towards where his hometown was, wondering if his GG was going to send reinforcements. But he shook that off as he turned back to the present and what training he could do. Naruto's mouth quickly formed into a foxy grin as he looked at his clones. "Let's test that out, shall we?" he said, causing the grins to start to pale from what Naruto might put them through. Naruto and his team sat down to dinner the last night before Kakashi would be back to full health. Now that Kakashi was reaching full strength again, Kakashi himself was preparing for Zabuza to appear again soon, which would be most likely within the next few days. He had told his genin as such and they had all nodded, agreeing to be prepared for his accomplice. In regards to training, Sakura had mastered the tree climbing exercise within the week. She had come home exhausted every day, but she wore a proud smile at the end of the week as she sat next to her teammates. Sasuke had managed to finally reach the top of the tree about halfway through the day yesterday and had been working on mastering this exercise. He had never thanked Naruto for his help, but he rarely called Naruto a dope nowadays. Something Naruto had noted with interest. Naruto was constantly watching Tsunade on guard duty, but what no one knew was that he used this time to study the Genjutsu he had memorized the seals for and get the appropriate level of chakra for each technique. Despite figuring out the main problem with his Genjutsu, Naruto had needed to train with his techniques, just as with any jutsu, in order to get them down correctly and begin to master them. It had, initially, been a question of how much of his chakra he would have to use to get the Genjutsu to catch. After he had managed that against his clones, he kept using those techniques in order to get used to the way the chakra flowed within him and how the Genjutsu required him to use his chakra. The ultimate goal of this was to make it so he could cast Genjutsu with just a single movement of his body, something that he had been enamored with once he read about it in his Genjutsu book. He could proudly say that he could do almost all of the Genjutsu he had memorized the hand seals for and one of his own self-made Genjutsus. He was rather excited to try it out in a combat situation, and, though he knew that was hazardous, he knew that Kurenai had approved of all of his Genjutsu and said that they would be able to be used in combat once he had tested them himself to make sure they would be cast. Naruto looked up from his food and noticed that Inari was glaring at him as he and his team sat there with a happy and carefree air surrounding them. Naruto shrugged the little boy's glare off and continued to eat as he listened to Sakura speak to Tsunade about cooking skills, while the rest of the table simply sat in silence, enjoying their meals. "Why?" Inari whispered, but Naruto caught it. He turned his gaze onto the little child as he gave him his full attention. He noticed that Inari had some tears accumulating on the edge of his eyes. "Why do you bother to try so hard? No matter how hard you train, you still won't be able to match Gato's men. No matter how hard you try, the weak will only end up getting trampled by the strong. You're gonna get killed." He yelled at the team. Sasuke scoffed and Sakura looked a bit upset at the boy's outburst. It was Naruto's expression that hardened, his icy blues locking all form of irritation behind their reflective glacial appearance. "You're wrong, kid. Don't lump us together with you," he said coldly to the young wave resident. Tsunade, Tsunade, and Kakashi all shivered at his tone, something they couldn't get used to since it came from a child, or in Kakashi's case, his sensei's happy-go-lucky kid. Inari scoffed. "What the hell do you know about me?" he shouted as his tears started flowing freely. "You're always training and acting like Gato's men won't even faze you. You act so damn high and mighty just because you're a ninja. You're nothing like me. You don't know how hard life can really be." He finished as his tirade came to a close. Kakashi looked over to Naruto, his eye widening at a look he had thought he would never see again. Kakashi felt his body shiver as he looked into Naruto's eyes. Naruto's eyes were no longer their glacial appearance as before. They had morphed into a rolling maelstrom of anger and contempt. Kakashi could almost hear the snap of Naruto's handle upon his emotions as he glared at Inari with all of the force of his emotions. Tsunade and Tsunade seemed shocked at Naruto's sudden change in attitude. The kid hadn't been the happiest around them, but he was never one to get angry or brood. The sheer amount of contempt that Naruto had in his gaze made them wonder what the hell he had gone through for what Inari had said to trigger this type of response. Sasuke and Sakura stared at Inari before turning to Naruto and flinching back from his eyes. They never knew Naruto could ever hold anger within his gaze, but the sheer amount within those blue stormy eyes was enough to curdle any man's stare. Inari started to shiver when Naruto's eyes had locked onto his own, and Naruto spoke in a low voice. "So, it's okay for you to sit around your house moping like some tragic hero? Each and every day simply wasting your time crying your little eyes out? What a waste," Naruto said. Inari's body shivered and his eyes were puffy from his crying, but he still managed to retort. "You have no idea how much I have lost." Naruto's stare didn't waver at all. "Your father," he said solemnly. "I'm sure Kaiza would be turning over in his grave. His son being a coward and all." He said with contempt. "Naruto, you've said enough," Sakura said as she shot up and glared at Naruto. Naruto turned away from the table and stood. He scoffed before walking out of the house and into the woods surrounding the house. The whole table watched as he left, a single question running through their heads. What the hell happened to him? Scene break. Naruto awoke to the sound of yelling outside the house. He blinked his eyes as his brain rushed to catch up with what was happening. "Stop! If you hurt him, I'll bite my tongue off," Tsunade yelled from outside. Naruto heard two men grunt before one responded. "Lucky brat, you get to live. Let's go, we only need one of them," the man said before Naruto heard Inari start to sob. As this happened, his mind caught the position of the sun and the fact that it was much later in the day than he had thought. He realized that the men out there must be thugs sent to kidnap Tsunade's family in order to get some leverage on the bridge builder, probably in case Zabuza failed. So Naruto crept out of his futon, noticing he was still dressed, and peered out of the window down to the dock that surrounded the house. He saw the two men, one of which had Tsunade in a hold and the other looking at the crying Inari. Both had swords strapped to their waists. One had the oddest assortment of tattoos littering his body with an eye patch and a rolled-down shirt bunched up at his waist leading to zebra-style pants. The other wore an overcoat with a black hat and beige pants with tattoos around his eyes. Just as soon as Naruto took this in, Inari let loose a loud cry, causing Naruto to smirk at the kid's renewed courage. "Wait!" he yelled at the two. "Looking at her pretty skin really makes me want to cut something, kid. You shouldn't be an annoyance," the man with the tattoos said. "Get away from my mom," Inari yelled, ignoring the man's threat and charging forward. The two men smirked, looking at the kid's blind charge with amusement. Naruto watched as Inari approached the two men. He was 5 steps away when the one with the overcoat said, "Cut him," and both of the men took stances with their hands on their swords. He had reached 3 steps away when they both started to unsheath their swords in preparation for their swings. He was 1 step away when Tsunade yelled out, "Inari!" and both of the men swung their swords at the kid who dared to interfere with their job, one with a happy smile on his face, the other with indifference. Inari's body hit the ground, his face stuck in his clenched eye pose as he charged at his opponents. Tsunade stared in shock as her son's body was cut to ribbons in front of her, and her eyes started to leak tears while she fell to the floor, her legs losing the will to keep standing after seeing one of the last people in her family having perished. The two men simply scoffed at the boy with contempt and amusement at his foolish attempt to save his mother. They were both shocked when they saw, not blood, but Sakura petals start to pour from the 3 pieces that the boy they had supposedly cut to pieces. The Sakura petals started to increase in number until a particularly violent wave of wind seemed to blow up and they covered their eyes in an attempt to block their eyes from damage. By the time both of them could see again, they couldn't see any part of Inari in front of them. They both looked a bit shocked at that until they noticed that Tsunade had disappeared as well. "Damn!" the one with the tattoos said as the Sakura petals started to swirl around them. "Genjutsu. I hate ninja," the man said. "You two made 3 mistakes today." A disembodied voice drifted to them. Both of them placed their backs to each other as they drew their weapons and set themselves in a defensive position. "The first was working for scum like Gato," the voice said from seemingly everywhere. "The second was attacking those under my own protection," a hint of annoyance flowing into the voice which caused the 2 samurai to take a swing in one direction together, both of them hitting nothing. "The final mistake," was attacking innocents during battle. The voice said before they both felt weights on their backs and their throats being sliced by cold metal before they began to hold their throats in a futile attempt to stem the flood of blood that came from the deadly attack. Scene break. Genjutsu. Sakura Genso? 1. Naruto said as he stood about 10 steps away from the two men. He watched as the two began to move around almost as if blind to the world. His eyes had returned to their icy blue as he looked at the scum that had attempted to kill Inari. He made 2 Kage Bunshin and turned to Tsunade and Inari, both of whom were looking at Naruto in awe at how fast he had gotten them away from the 2 samurai. He spoke then, his voice slightly warmer than before. "Good job, Inari. Your father would be proud." Inari smiled widely from Naruto's praise. Having heard a little about Naruto's childhood from Kakashi, Inari felt a bit connected with Naruto. "Tsunade-san, is there any place you can go hide until this day is over with?" he asked as he looked over at the matriarch that had been watching the house. Tsunade nodded. "Then please head there now. These shadow clones will protect you until you reach there and act as guards," he said as he made another 10 clones and sent Tsunade and Inari on their way. He turned back to the 2 samurai as Tsunade and Inari went around the house. He saw his shadow clones draw their kunai across the men's throats and winced slightly as he watched their shocked expressions turn into horrified looks before watching as their eyes slowly dimmed with each flow of blood that escaped their bodies. Naruto was a bit surprised the men hadn't dispelled the Genjutsu since he had known about it, but he supposed it didn't matter since the man was now dead. He felt a sliver of pride as he realized he had just successfully used Genjutsu during combat. But that was crushed by another feeling. He felt remorse for killing the 2, but he couldn't leave them alive. They were enemies and had already tried to kill a person under his protection, a child no less. They were dead the moment they swung at Inari. He sighed before pushing them into the water and having his 2 clones wash the blood away before it stained as he looked over towards the bridge. He would have to deal with his emotions later. Right now, his team needed him. He jumped up into the trees and quickly began to travel towards the bridge. Scene break. Naruto arrived at the bridge, hidden by the mist that Naruto could tell was Zabuza's since it had his chakra in it just like the last time. He looked at the bridge for a moment before deciding coming up the side of it would be better than running along the top of it and began to scale the walls from down by the water. As he reached the top of the bridge, he stopped when he heard Makyu Hayushu. Naruto slowly peeked over the edge of the bridge and took stock of the situation before rushing in like he might have done before his forced transformation. He saw Sasuke standing in the middle of some ice mirrors, Senbon riddling his body with blood dripping from the many cuts on his body. He saw a flash and Sasuke suddenly had more Senbon in his body than before. He assumed that was the accomplice's jutsu. He panned his view to look over at where he felt Kakashi's chakra battling Zabuza's. He saw that the 2 were in a tense face-off that Kakashi desperately wanted to get out of because of his frequent glances over at Sasuke's battle. He also noticed that Sakura was shaking slightly, but her face held a determination that hadn't been there the last time they faced Zabuza. She and Tazuna were behind Kakashi with her acting as the last guard. Naruto quickly decided that Kakashi could handle Zabuza and that Sasuke was in need of his help more at the moment. Naruto made a shadow clone and waited for the appropriate moment for him to jump in. He saw his chance when he saw Sakura speak to Tazuna and jump away from him, tossing a kunai at the mirrors, and Naruto watched as Zabuza's accomplice melted out of the mirrors and grabbed it. He instantly threw his own shuriken at the person in the mirrors. It hit the person, managing to knock the person out of their jutsu and land outside the circle of mirrors. He signaled the Kage Bunshin and it jumped up onto the bridge as he snuck under it and popped up on the other side as the whole contingent of ninja were distracted by his Kage Bunshin's loud entrance. Uzumaki Naruto is finally here. Nothing to fear. His shadow clone yelled out as Kakashi, Sasuke, the Hunter Nin, and Zabuza all looked over at him. Kakashi smiled, as did Sakura, while Sasuke held a grimace of pain. The Hunter Nin's face was obscured and Zabuza seemed to have a twitch in his eye. Naruto smirked as he quietly snuck into the circle of mirrors, years of inadvertent stealth training making it easy for him to do so without catching attention. Zabuza's arm seemed to twitch and four shuriken flew out towards Naruto. Kakashi and Sakura watched with widened eyes as the shuriken flew true and lodged themselves in 4 different lethal points on the body. Zabuza seemed to smirk as Naruto looked down in surprise and the Hunter Nin stood from his position. Naruto! Sakura yelled in disbelief. Naruto suddenly smirked. Fooled ya! He said before poofing into smoke, and the entire contingent blinked except Sasuke, who finally spoke from his place under Naruto's arm. You, cough dobe, he said weakly. Naruto smirked as he lifted Sasuke and began to leave the circle of ice mirrors. Every eye snapped to where Naruto and Sasuke were now standing, and Kakashi eye smiled in pride. Zabuza didn't take too kindly to how Naruto had fooled the man and said, Haku, kill that boy. With annoyance in his voice, the hunter Nin, finally named in Naruto's case, Haku nodded before rushing into one of the mirrors in an attempt to keep Naruto from leaving the circle of mirrors. Naruto increased his speed, slightly cursing Sasuke's loud mouth and hoping to beat the ice user's own rush. It was not to be, as Naruto was right about to leave from the circle when he was stopped by a hail of senbon that he had to jump back to avoid. He cursed and set Sasuke back on his own feet, both getting ready to fight this enemy. They're finished in that jutsu, Kakashi. Now, let's get this started, Zabuza said as he looked at Kakashi. Kakashi merely stared at the man as he tried to figure out if he was going to be able to get around him and help Sasuke and Naruto. Can't use Kage Bunshin, and if I leave, he will just kill Tsunade. Damn, but how does that kid have such a jutsu? He thought to himself as he heard his students' grunts of pain. A Kekiai Genkai, Kakashi said. Zabuza laughed maniacally as he nodded to Kakashi's assumption, and Kakashi cursed again. Naruto's eyes darted everywhere as he looked at the many different reflections of his enemy. Why the hell did you come in here, Naruto? You should have attacked from outside, Sasuke reprimanded. Naruto rolled his eyes, ignoring the fact that if Sasuke had kept his mouth shut, he could have managed to get Sasuke out of here. Sasuke just scoffed and began doing hand seals. Katan, Gukyaku no Jutsu, he said as he inhaled a large amount of air and exhaled, sending a particularly large amount of fire directly at one of the ice mirrors. Good call, Sasuke. The fire should melt the ice, Naruto thought. Both he and Sasuke were surprised when the ice mirror simply seemed to have a bit of condensation on it from the intense heat. Haku chuckled as he looked at his enemies. A fire of that level won't do anything to my ice, Haku said as Sasuke and Naruto were suddenly riddled with more senbon. Naruto grunted and saw Sasuke fall to a knee as his usage of chakra and his wounds took their toll. Then I'll just break every single one of them, Naruto said as he summoned up close to 15 more clones, and they all separated while heading to their own mirrors. Naruto blinked as flashes began to appear and the memories of his clones' short lives began to replay. Naruto saw as each was destroyed by a Haku while stabbing it in the neck. He cursed as he felt each of his clones disperse and his own body become riddled with senbon yet again. He knew his regeneration was working on the cuts, but the senbon inside his body would cause more damage if he pulled them out. Both he and Sasuke were looking around trying to find the real one. I suppose I should just tell you, trying to find the real me is useless. You will never be able to follow my movements. This jutsu uses the reflections to move myself to each mirror. From my point of view, you seem to be moving in slow motion, Haku said. Naruto and Sasuke cursed. Naruto considered removing the weights around his legs but decided that they awarded him more protection on than increasing his speed if what Haku said was true. No jutsu is invulnerable, Haku-san. Every shinobi knows that. It's just a matter of finding that weakness. Naruto scoffed as he looked at Sasuke out the corner of his eye. Sasuke is almost dead on his feet. I need to get him out of here. I only have that one genjutsu I can use. If this doesn't work, I'm going to be out of tricks, he thought. He began to make the hand sign for the Kage Bunshin when Haku spoke again. I see, Haku said, noticing Naruto's now ice-cold eyes and Sasuke's burning determination. It is hard for me to kill my heart and become a true shinobi. If possible, I like to avoid bloodshed, but I see that you two are determined. Very well. I will kill my gentle heart with the cold blade of a killer and become the tool Zabuza-sama needs of me, Haku said right as Naruto began to move again. This bridge is where we shall fight for our dreams, your dreams and mine. I fight to protect those precious to me, to fight for that person, to work for that person, to see his dream made real. For that I can kill you, he said right as Naruto spoke. Ninpo, Shadow clone no jutsu, Naruto yelled as close to 30 clones appeared, and they all started to jump up into the air to attack the mirrors again. Foolish, Haku said as he disappeared and became that flash again to destroy the clones. He missed Naruto's smirk as he began his own hand seals. He saw that Sasuke was now beginning his own hand seals too. He ignored Sasuke as he rushed through his sequence and whispered out, Genjutsu, Kankaku Chuden. 2. Just as Naruto finished his own jutsu, Sasuke exhaled again and let loose his own fireball as Naruto's final clone dispersed. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as he saw Haku appear in the mirrors again with the tail of his kimono burnt from Sasuke's attack. Naruto turned to Sasuke and noticed his eyes. Sharingan, he said quietly, but Sasuke heard him. Sasuke turned to Naruto and his eyes widened as he saw his reflection, catching sight of his precious Sharingan spinning in his eyes. 2 tomos were in his right eye and his left eye had 1 tomo. Sasuke smirked superiorly. Naruto nodded and turned his attention back to Haku. Those eyes, I see you are of the Uchiha clan, are you? Haku said. Then this battle must end now. I regret to kill you, but there is a limit to how long I can keep up this speed. Haku's chakra spiked and Naruto cursed mentally. Damn it. He dispelled my Genjutsu before he even left the mirrors. Did he notice it, or was that merely a fluke? Naruto thought to himself as he felt a few more senbon hit him, and he fell to a knee as the pain began to build. Sasuke dodged the senbon and yelled, Just try to dodge Naruto. He is slowing and he must be close to losing what chakra he has left. Naruto grunted as he attempted to stand from his place. Just as Sasuke said this, Sakura's scream could be heard from the thick mist that had accumulated at the other end of the bridge. Both Sasuke and Naruto's heads snapped to it as a bolt of fear shot through the two of them. Haku saw his chance and took it. A spike of chakra alerted the 2 Konoha ninja as Haku emerged from his mirror. Naruto's eyes could see only a flash as Sasuke thought to himself, Damn! Make it in time. All Naruto felt was his body being pushed as he fell to the floor and then the sound of senbon entering the body. He looked back to see Haku laying on the floor with Sasuke standing over Naruto himself. All you ever do is get in the way, dope, Sasuke said before he coughed up blood, a huge splash of it landing in front of his hurt body. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. Sasuke, he said urgently as he began to stand back up. Geez, what's with that face, you cough moron? Sasuke said as he looked back at Naruto. You idiot! I didn't ask you to save me, Naruto shouted, his blue eyes staring into Sasuke's lone, exposed Sharingan eye. I don't know why. My body just moved on its own, Sasuke said as his eyes began to glaze over. Naruto's eyes widened even further as he rushed forward, his pretenses of keeping his speed hidden completely gone, as he reached Sasuke before he even fell an inch. He looked down at the Uchiha's eyes, his own speaking his concern as he looked at him. That cough man, my brother, cough? I swore I wouldn't cough, die until I had killed him, Sasuke said, his voice fading with each word. Don't you die too? He whispered out as he fell limp in Naruto's arms and his eyes closed for the final time. Naruto's eyes reflected Sasuke's still body as he stared at his teammate's death, his mind having gone blank at the information that Sasuke had died. He landed a blow on me without flinching and died to protect you, to protect a precious person, knowing it was a trap and still willing to jump in. He is a shinobi that deserves respect, Haku said as he rose from his position, watching as Naruto's eyes kept staring into Sasuke's closed ones as he gently laid his body down on the ground, crouching above his body in a protective stance. Is this your first death of a friend? Haku questioned, his tone light, like he is talking of the weather. This is the way of the shinobi, he said as he began to merge into a mirror again. Naruto's eyes never left Sasuke's face, his mind finally catching up to what had happened and what had been done while he had stood by and simply watched. His mind flashing with instances of camaraderie with Sasuke, which despite their oddities, Sasuke and Naruto did have a few. Naruto's feelings about Sasuke had gone through a major change. Naruto still felt a small connection with all of his teammates. The fact he had helped Sasuke proved that, so it wasn't surprising when Naruto's reaction was violent by the death of his first comrade. I will never forgive you, Naruto thought as he looked down at his teammate. Then he felt it. the unimaginable power, the unstoppable hatred and anger that encompassed that power, the roiling emotions that came behind this new revelation. Naruto's mind instantly reached for the power he needed. He felt his hairs stand on end and his anger swell as the power began to fill him. His emotions swept aside in a veritable tidal wave of hatred and anger that led to Naruto's body snapping his head straight at Haku's mirrors and his voice saying, in a low and gravelly tone that sounded more malicious than anything Naruto himself could ever achieve, "I'll kill you," he snarled out as his canine teeth sharpened. His hair began to sway in the power well that he was becoming. His nails sharpened into claws and his eyes changed from his icy blues to a malignant red with slitted pupils leading to Haku's surprise behind his mask. Naruto felt the power swell and swirl around him as his anger grew. The red chakra becoming visible to the naked eye as it began to swirl and twist around him, looking almost like a whirlpool from Haku's highest mirror before the very top of the chakra swirl morphed into a snarling fox's head and the concrete of the bridge began to get cut from the chakra. Haku watched in fascination as the cuts on Naruto's body instantly started to heal and the malignant aura of whatever Naruto was doing began to swell out and encompass the area surrounding them. What killer intent! He is totally different. Haku thought to himself as he saw Naruto's gaze whip around and stare at the real him. Haku raised his arms and sent his senbon flying as Naruto came charging at him. Naruto continued running forward and let loose a roar as the senbon came close. The roar combined with his chakra deflecting the senbon. He deflected them? Haku though to himself. Naruto started to look around furiously in every direction. Haku came dropping in from the top, but Naruto easily flipped himself to the side with his increased reflexes and actions being enhanced by the Kubizuki. Haku landed and dashed off towards his next mirror. But Naruto was not having it. He dashed forward and disappeared from sight as he appeared next to Haku, grabbing the boy by his leg and slamming the surprised ice user onto the ground. Haku stood back up, but was instantly caught by Naruto's hand as he roared again, causing Haku to grunt as he tried to hold back the force of chakra that Naruto was sending out against his mirrors. Naruto seemingly smirked before sending his punch straight at Haku's face mask. Haku went flying and crashed through his own mirror, skidding to a stop at the edge of the mist that Zabuza created. Naruto stood in the middle of the crumbling ice mirrors, looking like a demon in human skin as he glared at Haku. "I am sorry, Zabuza-sama. I cannot defeat this boy," Haku thought as he watched Naruto close in for the kill. Naruto seemed to appear next to Haku and Haku simply closed his eyes to accept his fate. But Boruto grabbed the kid by the throat and slammed him back onto the concrete, keeping his hand around Haku's neck as he glared down at him, his eyes now his normal blue. "What's the matter? Can't kill me even though I killed your precious friend?" Haku questioned as he looked up at Naruto with dead eyes. Naruto scoffed as he looked down at Haku. "Precious? He is only precious to me in regards to my team. Other than that, I have no interest in him," Naruto stated coldly. "Your actions state otherwise," Haku said. Naruto merely shook his head. "I have another reason for that. But tell me, why would you work for such scum as Zabuza?" Naruto asked with a hint of curiosity. Haku smiled. "Back when I was a child." Naruto clenched harder on his neck as he heard Kakashi say something in the mist while Zabuza cried out in pain. "Short version Haku-san, or you may fail yet again," Naruto said coldly as the mist began to drift away. "He is my precious person," Haku said while smiling sincerely. Naruto's hold on his neck faltered right as Kakashi yelled out, "Chidori!" Haku and Naruto both heard a sound that resembled those of 1,000 birds chirping. Naruto looked up to see Kakashi standing with his hand encased in what looked to be lightning, while Zabuza was being held down by dogs with bandanas on their bodies or necks. "I will say this once more. Surrender, Zabuza," Kakashi said. "Never," Zabuza replied as he struggled against his bindings. Kakashi sighed before beginning to move forward, almost instantly disappearing into a flash as Naruto let go of Haku's neck. Naruto looked down at Haku, seeing the desperation and pleading in those eyes, so very much like his own. Naruto's cold mask broke and his emotions burst forth. Thoughts about how much he hated not being able to help Sasuke, and he wasn't even a true precious person like Haku seemed to feel about Zabuza. Naruto closed his eyes, shaking his head slightly. "Go save him. But you know he is just going to die anyways." Naruto said tiredly before turning and leaving Haku as he made his way back to Sasuke's body. Naruto made a Kage Bunshin, who kneeled down and picked up Sasuke's body as Naruto's sensor told him that Haku had saved Zabuza from Kakashi's attack. He sighed before turning around, intent on helping Kakashi. He saw that Kakashi had ran Haku through with his jutsu, something which Naruto found intriguing about the piercing ability of such an attack. He also noticed how blood was splattered all over the bridge where Kakashi was standing as Haku's blood poured from his still body. Zabuza had a slightly shocked look in his face as Kakashi was looking at Haku with confusion. What Naruto was unprepared for was for Zabuza to smirk at his sensei. "Seems I really got a good tool," and bring his huge blade around with his right arm as his left hung limply by his side, smacking the flat of his giant blade into Kakashi and Haku, whose body was stuck on Kakashi's arm, thus weighing him down, and sent them crashing into Tsunade and Sakura, knocking out the rest of his team. Naruto began to take stock of the situation by first sensing Zabuza's chakra pool. He noticed the man's chakra was extremely depleted from his fight with Kakashi. He also noticed that he hadn't lifted his Zanbato from its position after it had slammed into the concrete of the bridge from his swing, which knocked out his sensei. Finally, Naruto saw that the man's chest was heaving as he took big breaths through his bandages. Naruto's face set back into an emotionless mask as he began the hand seals to the same Genjutsu that he had cast on Haku. "Genjutsu, Kankaku Chuden," he whispered to himself as he cast the Genjutsu at Zabuza. Naruto waited, tensed after he had cast the Genjutsu, expecting the Jounin to sense the invading chakra and immediately dispel the Genjutsu. He began to stalk forward, his hand grabbing a kunai from his pouch as he stealthily took a few steps and leaned down, his fingers reaching for the weights on his legs. He let out a low breath as he pressed the release button on his weights just as Zabuza seemed to get some strength back into his body as he started to raise his blade. Naruto, knowing he had only one shot at this, quickly channeled chakra to his legs to reach his maximum speed, around low Jounin level when he could run in a straight line, as he dashed towards his opponent. Zabuza's ears twitched, and that was all the warning Naruto got as he appeared to streak towards Zabuza. Zabuza swung his cleaver around in an arc behind himself to attack his opponent, but Naruto smirked as the blade passed harmlessly in front of him. His Genjutsu worked and stepped into the man's guard before he could recover, slamming his kunai into Zabuza's sole remaining usable arm. Naruto was rewarded for his efforts as he heard Zabuza grunt in pain and, realizing that his Genjutsu had been released by said pain, jumped back as Zabuza's arm fell limp by his side, his huge Zanbato sticking up out of the ground from where he had tried to slash Naruto with it. "You," Zabuza said as his eyes widened at who had injured him. "You're the one who hurt Haku, weren't you? How the hell did you evade my attack?" Zabuza almost shouted. "There's no way I missed hitting someone like you," Zabuza announced. Naruto looked at him with cold eyes, but his expression could almost be taken to be screaming, "Are you fucking stupid or just plain ignorant?" As he stared Zabuza's panting frame down, Naruto finally spoke. "Do you really expect me to tell an enemy, even if you're going to die, my secrets?" he asked, a tone of annoyance well hidden in his otherwise emotionless voice. Zabuza just stared at Naruto for a few more tense moments, Naruto waiting for an attack he knew Zabuza could initiate and probably win even with just his feet, and Zabuza simply tilted his head back while roaring with laughter as his useless arms swung by his shaking torso. "You must be the only real shinobi on your team, kid. Even Kakashi has lost his edge, but yours remains as sharp as mine. What's your name?" Zabuza asked. Naruto's eyebrow rose as he noticed his clone had finished laying all of the knocked-out bodies behind him while closing Haku's dead eyes. He nodded, "Uzumaki Naruto. Now!" He was cut off as he looked over to where a short, balding, gray-haired man with glasses and a cane as he looked at Zabuza and Naruto with a condescending gaze. The thing that both shinobi noticed, though, was the huge mob of thugs that were standing behind the man. "Gato, what do you want?" Zabuza said as Naruto turned his body so he was facing the thugs, while still keeping a part of himself in guard for an attack from Zabuza's direction. He silently started to pay closer attention to his bloodline as he allowed his senses to pick up any incoming threats while Zabuza continued talking. He was trying to make sure that no shinobi were hidden within the massive amount of thugs. "Well, you see, Zabuza, the plan has changed a little. Well, not for me, since I planned to do this since the beginning. You see, I never planned to pay you Zabuza, Gato said as he talked in a voice that just spoke of how little respect he had of Zabuza. This is how it is. I can't hire regular ninja since they are too expensive and will probably betray me because of their loyalty, Gato said while making air quotes about the word loyalty. So, I get you missing neens who are easy to take care of afterwards. I let you weaken yourself by fighting the people I need you to, then I kill you with numbers. See, it costs me nothing since I already pay these guys and they get a huge reward for killing you. It's just good business, Gato said. Uzumaki Naruto, it would seem I no longer have a reason to want that bridge builder dead. Hence, I no longer have a reason to fight you, Zabuza said. Naruto just nodded as he confirmed there were nothing but thugs in the group. There are no shinobi within the group, Zabuza-san. If you wish, I can incapacitate them, Naruto said. Zabuza looked over at Naruto before shaking his head. A censor, I should have known. No, my time has come. My arms are useless and my shinobi career is ended. Let me die the way I wish to. Lend me a kunai, he said to Naruto. Naruto nodded and tossed him a kunai which he caught in his teeth, having ripped his bandages with his sharpened teeth. He then charged towards the group of thugs, his eyes set on Gato as Gato sensed the danger and turned around, running into the midst of his thugs. Kill him, he yelled, and the thugs all smirked while stepping forward menacingly. What made them pause was the aura that surrounded Zabuza as he ran forward. Many thugs stopped and muttered, "Demon," as he continued OT run past the thugs while they riddled his body with their weapons. Naruto watched as the man charged forth with his own goal. He ran past some 300 thugs and reached the back of the group, running past Gato's quivering form before speaking a few words Naruto couldn't hear and, with a single swipe of his head, decapitated the greasy businessman before keeling over from his many wounds. Naruto bowed his head in respect for the man's choice of death. Naruto suddenly grew very aware of the fact he was now standing in front of some 250 thugs that were all staring at their meal ticket's headless body. On top of that, they were all armed to the teeth, even the ones that had stabbed Zabuza. So, knowing that he had enough chakra to do this once, he began to do the hand seals to the only genjutsu he thought could work against this many people while speaking, "You guys should run. Zabuza was weakened and I am not," he said as he continued his hand signs. Only 80 more to go. The thugs looked hesitant for a few moments, their eyes darting from Zabuza's prone form back to Naruto's hands as he started to build chakra for his technique. Some of the thugs felt their hairs begin to stand on end, but one lone voice cried out, "Look at how many of us there are. There's no way he can take us all." The voice shouted, "Only 50 more seals to go." The thugs gained confidence and began to beat their weapons in their hands as they were beginning to get hyped up on killing the shinobi. "Then after we kill him, we can ransack the town." The same voice rang out as Naruto continued his hand signs. Only 30 more to go. Naruto felt their gazes turn upon him and he smirked as they only just now started to run. 10 hand signs left and Naruto spoke. "Since you didn't heed my warning, take this," he said as his hand signs finished and he called out his technique. "Genjutsu, Burrito no Senjo, 3. He said as he held his final hand sign with a foxy grin in place on his face. The thugs continued running before suddenly blinking and starting to look around. Naruto had disappeared, as did the bodies of his comrades. They all began muttering to themselves as they looked around, a few raising their weapons in defense as they took their stances. Suddenly, a myriad of different blades appeared on the surface of every solid landscape in their field of vision. The weapons that appeared seemed different each time. In front of the head thug was a wicked-looking katana with a ragged edge. Near the edge of the bridge was Naginata that stood almost 10 feet into the air from where it was plunged into the ground. Yet another weapon was sticking out from the railing on the opposite side, this time a trench knife with fingers for the knuckles. As the thugs looked around, they were slightly awed and, at the same time, scared of each of the blades appearing on the surfaces. Naruto suddenly appeared in front of the thugs again and one thug yelled out, "There he is! Get him!" Naruto simply smirked as the thugs began moving as a unit while trying to reach him. He reached down and pulled the katana from the ground and blocked an attack as screams began to ring out from the back and sides of the group of thugs. Even in the middle where the thugs had thought they were safe, Naruto's were appearing everywhere where there was a weapon and grabbing a hold of it before attacking the closest thug. This is my first time using this technique. I hope you like it. The Narutos said as they continued to hack and slash into the thugs. After about half of them had fallen, the thugs began to hack and slash at the Narutos that had appeared, but any time they managed to land a hit, the Naruto would simply shrug it off and it would heal inordinately fast as the Naruto kept attacking. Even when someone cut Naruto in half, the Naruto simply looked down at his legs and said, "Well, that was unpleasant." Before his legs reattached themselves and he cut the thug that had cut him. Finally, one thug dropped his weapon as he saw there was only about 50 thugs left and said, "What are you?" Naruto's cold eyes reflected in the light as he looked at the man. "Anything I want to be," he said before the thugs screamed. Scene break. Naruto panted as he held his hand sign in place while the thugs stood there. Their eyes glazed over as Naruto assaulted their minds. He saw a few of them begin to move around and was about to curse when he noticed that many of them were started to stumble around drunkenly. Before Naruto knew it, close to 80 thugs had simply walked off the bridge and fallen to their death while still under his Genjutsu. Naruto felt the villagers getting closer and released his Genjutsu, his panting under control as he appeared nonplussed that he had just cast a Genjutsu over almost 300 people during his first real battle. The thugs blinked and they slowly realized that they were no longer being massacred by immortal little men with innumerable weapons. But their resolve had been broken. Naruto could see them casting fearful looks at him. Suddenly, a crossbow bolt came crashing down in front of them and Inari's voice rang out. "If you come any further then the citizens of Wave will fight you with all that we have," he yelled. Naruto just smirked before turning back to the thugs, all of whom noticed that his gaze was now on them. That foxy grin back on his face like before. "Boo!" he said. That was all it took. The thugs turned tail and began to run towards the edge of the bridge, grabbing a hold of ladders they had there and quickly taking off in the boats that had been floating down at the bottom of the bridge. "Grandpa," Inari said as he ran to the bridge builder's side. Naruto smiled at Inari, a slightly forced one but his first to the young boy. "He will be fine, Inari. He just got knocked out," he said as Inari nodded and Naruto turned to the villagers. "Could you guys please help me with my knocked out team members and Haku and Zabuza and—" He trailed off as he looked at Sasuke with remorse, wishing he could have done more. "Ugh, my head. What the hell happened?" Sasuke groaned out as he sat up, holding his head. Naruto's expression ran through so many different emotions no one caught them, but the biggest showed as Naruto smiled down at Sasuke. "You got knocked the hell out, that's what happened. Team," he said. Sasuke snapped his head towards Naruto and looked at Zabuza and Haku's bodies. He began to clench his fist until Naruto spoke. "I didn't kill them. Stop brooding and get your ass over here. We need to get back to Tsunade's house and rest." Sasuke shot a glare at Naruto before standing and weakly starting to walk away. Naruto sighed. "Could you all please put Haku and Zabuza's bodies in preservation for a day or so, until I can dig them a grave?" Naruto asked, to which some men grabbed the bodies and began to move them away. Naruto turned to the rest. "Please grab my team members and Tsunade, so we may go back to his house. Also, could some people wash this blood off?" he asked as he pointed at where Haku had died. The men nodded before Naruto smiled. "Thanks guys. Now I think I'm going to pass out. Good night," Naruto said as he fell face forward, the mental exhaustion of what he had just done combined with pushing himself against Zabuza and Haku having finally caught up to him. No one noticed the shadow that jumped away in the trees on the mainland once Naruto passed out. Scene break. Naruto sighed as he looked at the two modest graves that the villagers had dug in his absence. He had been knocked out for the better part of 3 days, during which the wave members had dug the graves in honor of what he had done and Naruto had simply added Zabuza's weapon to the two graves. The bridge was to be completed the next day, so they would be leaving tomorrow right after they cut the ribbon for it. Dodging Kakashi's questions about how he had managed to defeat Zabuza actually was quite simple. He told him that Gato had shown up right after he knocked Kakashi out and no one even knew of the Genjutsu he used against the mob of thugs that had knocked him out for so long. That was the thing about using Genjutsu against that many people all at once. It required a great deal of split concentration. Something Naruto had managed only by using the adrenaline from his fights. But the result was the mental exhaustion taking its toll on him and causing him to pass out for so long. After saying Gato showed up, He spoke of how Zabuza killed half of the thugs before being killed himself, and then the villagers had shown up, explaining away his exhaustion as huge amounts of fatigue. He had managed to bypass Kakashi's questioning. Though he would put the real events in his report, he hoped Kakashi wouldn't go read that after he submitted it. He didn't want his relationship with Kurenai to be found out just yet, and if they found out about his Genjutsu, they would undoubtedly suspect Kurenai, since she was the only qualified Genjutsu master in the town. But Naruto shook that off as he looked at the graves again. I wish we could have met in a different life, Haku. I only met you on the battlefield, but I get the feeling you and I would have been able to be friends had we met elsewhere, he said before turning to Zabuza's grave. And you, I will always honor those whom die by their own decision. Thank you both, he said before turning away. I promise you this, Haku. I will protect my precious peoples, just as you protected yours. He thought to himself as he walked back to Tsunade's house. Scene break. Naruto and his team stood, packed and ready to go as Tsunade walked up to the ribbon and cut it to the cheering of the citizens of Wave. Naruto smirked slightly. He was in high spirits after seeing how the kids he had noticed slept outside now had Gato's manner to sleep in. Sasuke kept his usual grimace as Sakura smiled and waved to the public with Kakashi reading his porn. Once the cheering had died down a bit, Kakashi simply turned and began to walk away. Time to go home, Team 7, he said. Sasuke grunted and began walking, as well as Sakura followed him after bowing to the people of Wave. Naruto, however, walked up to Inari and spoke. Gonna be strong, Inari? He asked, and Inari nodded and tears began to form in his eyes before he rubbed them away. It's okay to cry every once in a while, just not constantly, all right, Inari? Naruto said as he put on another sort of forced, sort of genuine smile on his face. Inari nodded before the tears started to roll down his cheeks. Naruto wasn't eager to talk to the little kid, but he had been inordinately mean to him. He felt he should have encouraged him slightly. Naruto tousled his hair before turning and walking off towards his team. What's the name of the bridge, Tsunade? One of the workers asked. How about the super awesome Tsunade Bridge? He offered. The crowd booed his suggestion before Tsunade spoke quietly. The Great Naruto Bridge, in honor of the young man who brought hope back to the people of this country, she said. The crowd was silent for a moment before they burst into cheers for the name, and Tsunade carved the name into the plaque at the end of the bridge. Scene break. 1 week later at Kumogakure. Raikage-sama, I have a scout here to see you. The Raikage, a burly dark-skinned man, raised an eyebrow as he looked at the door to his office. Send him in. The door was opened and none other than his cousin, one of the best scouts they have in the field, appeared before the man as the door closed again. The Raikage's eyebrows raised a bit higher. What is so important you couldn't send a message? I have important information that I think you may find interesting, especially considering the upcoming Chunin selection exams, the scout said. The Raikage merely settled into his chair. I don't see how any genin could warrant the attention of my best scout. The Raikage implying heavily that he doubted his cousin's claim. You will, the scout said with certainty, when you hear what he has done and who he is. But first, have you sent out our bingo book for this month? He asked. The Raikage shook his head. Then I want you to add this genin under a high C rank, engage with caution warning, the scout said, which caused the Raikage to sit forward. No genin has ever been assigned anything above a low C rank with a capture on sight. What makes this guy so good? He asked. The scout seemed to smirk behind his mask. Now, do you believe this warrants my attention? Konoha has been hiding a diamond in the rough. I call him Konoha's.